This segment of My Conversation is brought to you by Aspect Ministries, effective 21st century faith.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of My Conversation. My name is Jason Hurst, your host for the very first segment. We got a good crowd today. Of course, we got a sponsor that shows up every single week. He doesn't get tired of us, and thanks for always being here. He's always very interesting. Michael Bogart of Aspect Ministries. Michael, thanks for being on the show.
And Happy New Year, Jason.
Happy New Year to you too.
Yeah, although this is what, starting the third week of January.
I know, it's crazy. It's flying on by already.
It's amazing.
How's your New Year's resolutions going?
Well, so far I'm okay, but it's only 3 weeks into January.
I hear you. So what you got going on right now this month at Aspect Ministries?
Well,
I know the book of Genesis, right?
Right, and of course last week Feather was the host, and we talked a little bit about the Genesis Challenge. So what I wanted to do was to offer the viewers, the audience, the chance to still get in on the Genesis Challenge. And so what I've done is on our aspectministries.com website, if you go to the blog tab, hit on the blog tab, and then you got to scroll down a little bit, and you'll find the actual beginning of the Genesis Challenge, where you read through the book of Genesis in the month of January. It's 50 chapters, so you average a couple chapters a day.
It's very interactive, I assume.
It is, and the thing about it is, people get real intimidated with Genesis because it records events that happened maybe 4,000 years ago in a very different culture. And so what I've done is I've provided an introduction to the book of Genesis that kind of helps people get over some of those cultural issues, solve some of those cultural differences. And then I've given a free link to my video that has to do, my 45-minute Bible video that has to do with
Love that video, by the way.
Yeah, but and you saw it.
I did.
But the part that deals with Genesis, I give a link to that so that people are kind of up and running by the time they start reading chapter 1. And then for every segment, and whether it's 2 chapters or 3 chapters or 1 chapter, for every section that I've kind of cut the book into, I give a little bit of an overview of that particular section and then some points to look for. So I think it's a really good way to get into this book in the month of January. First book of the Bible, first month of the year.
Well, that book is so deep. It seems like every word really matters. Not like every word in the Bible doesn't, but it's so detailed.
Well, yeah, and the thing about Genesis is it's the Bible's way of showing us where we came from, as the human race. And of course, the line of Israel, which is the Bible shows as being the redemptive family, the redemptive line, that through Israel, God is going to redeem the world. And it shows us the origins of that redemptive line in Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and on down to the
That's cool.
to the end of the book.
It's almost like bookends. You got Genesis and Revelation kind of like tied all together.
Well, that's right. Yeah, beginning and end of the Christian Bible. Of course, the Jewish people accept only what Christians call the Old Testament.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but we share that in common with Jewish folks, and that's
so
why
cool.
you can talk to Jewish people about things that Christians would, say were in the Old Testament, and you'll have a lot of common ground.
So it's interesting. You said 4,000 years ago. We always hear about in the beginning. So you say there's a number on it.
Well, really what I meant by that is that the times that starting in chapter 12, the times in which it discusses Abraham, that's about 3,500 to 4,000 years ago.
Because there's a timeline that goes back all the way to Adam.
Well, yeah.
Genealogy.
Right, and of course, you get before Abraham, before chapter 12, and the dating is a little bit fuzzy in terms of when all that happened. And of course, people debate the theory of evolution and the Bible and all that. And I don't really get into that. I just know, I know you can be fairly sure about your dates starting with chapter 12, being about 2000 BC.
What's your favorite part of the book?
I love the story of Joseph. It's the way the book ends. Joseph is a story of redemption and reconciliation. Remember, Joseph was sold into Egyptian slavery by his brothers.
That stinks.
And then, of course, in Egypt, God blessed him, even though he was a slave, even though he was in prison. Eventually, he gets elevated to become what we would call the prime minister of Egypt. And then the last few chapters deal with that long process of reconciliation between Joseph and his brothers, in which he forgives them completely for what they did.
It's a big time comeback too. God actually allowed it for him to happen that way.
Well, yeah, and if you don't believe in reconciliation and hope, then you need to read that last part of, say chapters 40 and on in the book of Genesis, because it's all about reconciliation. All good movies, the movies that really stir our hearts, I'm not talking about the shoot 'em ups and chases, but the movies that you walk away wanting to be a better person from, almost all of them have to do with reconciliation.
Well,
and
they're all like
redemption.
undertones, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, things like that.
Yeah, redemption, people finding hope and purpose. And Genesis is maybe, I should say, the genesis of all those kinds of stories.
Beginning.
It's the first of those redemptive stories. Yeah.
That is so cool. Somebody's really intimidated about it. How do you go about studying it?
Well, I would say what I've tried to do with the Genesis Challenge is to take the intimidation out of it.
Okay.
I think what I've tried to do is allow people the easiest way to get into the book, to overcome the cultural issues. And you are crossing into a different culture in Genesis.
Right.
I mean, you're dealing with Middle Eastern culture 4,000 years ago. And so some of that can be a little tough if you're not prepared for it, and that's what I've tried to do.
I'm amazed by you. How long does it take to put together a study like that?
I'm still working on it.
Yeah?
I haven't quite finished the last few chapters yet, but it's taken me a month.
You going to follow it all year long through the Bible?
Well, that'd be really, I don't think I'm quite up to that yet. But
That'll take a long time, huh? What's your favorite book in the Bible?
Well, I think Genesis might be among the favorites. I think John is a great book in the New Testament. So if you want a theological book, Romans, you can't beat Romans.
How about Acts?
And Acts is a great history of the early church.
The Holy Spirit comes into the picture.
Absolutely.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. The Bible's a great book. I can't think of a better way to guide a person's year than to get back into that book that people mean to sometimes and just never get around to it.
Okay, so what's the best way for everyone to get a hold of you right now?
Well, Mike@aspectministries.com is one way to email me personally. But if you want to get into this Genesis Challenge, like I said before, you go to Aspect Ministry, ASPECT, ministries.com, hit the blog tab, scroll down just a little bit to the Genesis Challenge, and you're there.
Always a pleasure, always exciting. Michael Bogart, thanks for being on the show. Stick around, there is a lot more to come.
This segment of My Conversation is brought to you by Aspect Ministries, Effective 21st Century Faith.